Dr. Koach Baruch Frazier, thank you for joining us again this week on TribeHerald.
My pleasure. My pleasure. It's good to be with you.
So this week's Parshat Vayera, we're going from just naming people to some serious issues, some serious domestic policy issues that are going through the land of Egypt at this point.
Uh-huh.
This is the majority of the plagues that are going to strike Egypt. What are some things that jump out to you about, this week's Parsha, being replete with all the plagues visiting Pharaoh's house, visiting the land of Egypt, and on and on?
What's one of the things that's very interesting to me is that it takes the plagues kind of coming into Paro's house for him to like actually say, okay, I'm gonna let y'all go, tell your God to stop. I mean, he doesn't end up doing that, but it is in that particular plague, the plague of the frogs, where he notices that not only is this guy kind of an external entity that can give power to, say, Moshe and Aaron to do certain things that his magicians can also do, like his magicians could do some of these other signs and wonders as they were, but when the frogs come into his house, come into his bedroom, on his stove, on his person, into the bowls where they need bread, like that is a different kind of intrusion or intimacy with a plague. And I think it brings up a question about what it takes for people to at least say that they are going to change. And it sounds like, according to this, that you got to get real close. You got to be almost in your house. You got to be in your house in order for you to see it. And I think that part of what we saw on Wednesday was that Paro had frogs enter into Paro's house. That we had an actual plague enter into the Capitol building. And so the government had to take notice now. The folks who've been telling us that everything's okay, that we just got to make it past this date and everything's going to be fine, that they got it directly inside the house. There's a plague, and what are we going to do about it?
And just like the plague of frogs happened after the plague of blood, that which attacked their number one natural resource at the time. It seems like it's the natural resources and then it's the people.
Yeah. And we see this here, right? We see all of the ways in which we have allowed capitalism run amok to destroy the land, destroy Turtle Island, so that the people are fleeing. Like, we have probably the largest migration that's happening in the United States right now is migration because of climate change, right? And so you have all of the ways in which we have destroyed the earth, and we will continue to see how some of these plagues are manifesting in other creation, like animals and land. But when you are now it's on me, I actually feel it. It's inside my house. I was reading one of the commentaries that said maybe they were describing all these ways that they were intimate, to even say maybe it was in their mouth, like there was a frog inside your mouth. If there's a frog in my mouth, I'm gonna say it's time to do something about it. And hopefully, at some point there will be some, at least, acknowledgement that change needs to happen.
Now,
And I think that's what we're getting now. We're getting an acknowledgement. Change hasn't happened yet, but we're getting an acknowledgement.
that first plague, the plague of blood, affected everyone. The Nile affects everyone, and it would affect everyone in Egypt. The plague of frogs would be, like you said, more personal. It's coming into your house. They're coming into your mouth. They're coming into absolutely every personal area. That first one feels more communal, like it was striking the people more so than the individual.
Well, I think that I think that, yes, like thinking about the blood in the Nile, you don't have water to drink, and that's like a sustenance. We need that for sustenance, right? So, and we're thinking about all of the people who would need access to that. Like, is it going into the channels? Yeah, it said even that it was blood was in the stones and in the wood, right? Like there was nowhere you couldn't find blood, right? And so it is affecting all of the people. But it's affecting them differently. Like it's not affecting Paro, right? It's not affecting people who may have access to water sources that, like maybe they already went to the well beforehand. Like somebody gave them a heads up and said, "Don't get your water now, because tomorrow you won't be able to get the water," right? Like there are seers and people who would know, or people who got the tips. Like that existed in all times and in all places, right? So there were probably people who did have access to water, or just a little bit. But the people who, let's say, down the Nile that didn't get the instruction that there was no longer going to be water available, those folks were affected differently and probably were more impacted by what was happening versus the frogs in terms of the seat of power. Paro was deeply and intimately affected, which is a different type of an event that could hopefully change what's happening.
You know, as these plagues are happening, the blood, lice, all of these things are affecting swaths of the population.
Mm-hmm.
But why are these people being affected? Because of Paro. Paro's hardening his heart. Therefore, millions of people have to deal with bloody water. Paro's not letting people go. So therefore, all the people have to suffer.
Right. And they have no say in it. They can't, like, who do they talk to? Who do the people of Mitzrayim go to? Like, do they have a political action committee that goes to Paro and says, please, whatever you are doing, change it so that we can stop suffering? And no, they don't. Like, we don't read about it, but maybe they had one. And like they couldn't go to Moshe and Aaron and be like, dude, we're on your side. Like, figure out how to just make these plagues on Paro. Why is it that it's upon all of us, right? I actually, like, that's the like yearning I hear from this text is like the people of Egypt have no say in this, and they are just kind of pawns and in this story, who have to endure all of this affliction because Paro, who, by the way, God says is hardening Paro's heart, keeps hardening his heart and won't allow the people to go.
But from, a lot of the commentaries explain that hardening Paro's heart didn't mean that it was injecting another will into his heart. It was just giving him the ability and the wherewithal to do what he wanted to do anyway, which was to oppress the Hebrew people.
Well, we don't know, right? Like, we don't know because we get this notion. We are told that Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh actually hardens the heart, right? And actually, it uses the word chabed or kabed, which means to strengthen, right? Like, so, like, to give Pharaoh this, like, even more like chutzpah to keep going on and doing exactly what he's doing. And actually, the only way it appears to soften one's heart is to get intimately, get so intimate with them in terms of experiencing loss or experiencing disruption, that's what actually creates the softness, because all of these other things kind of didn't phase Paro, except for those moments in which it was inside his palace, inside his house, inside his family, inside like getting close to him.
Which, I mean, just shows how much he cared about his people. People are people are losing livestock. People are losing crops. People are losing hours of sleep. But that's a non-issue.
Yeah, it sounds like our government, right? It sounds like a government who like cannot see that people have been suffering not only with racialized capitalism and white supremacy within our country, but just thinking about over these last 10, 11 months, the suffering of the people, that our government said, we'll give you $600. and you figure out what to do, or $1,200 or whatever it was. And it's like, for months, they sat on their butts and didn't do anything. And it's like they did not care. They didn't care for the people at all. They just allowed everything to just keep on going just as it was, because the wheels of this government are going to go anyway. They didn't care. They are, to me, no different than Paro.
And just like just like we saw in the Capitol, a lot of these Congress people were taken off guard. Mm-hmm. They've never seen anything like this.
That softened their heart. We've been out on the streets for decades, telling them it's a problem here. It's a whole problem we got in this country that isn't allowing for people to live and thrive, and they didn't want to hear it. But when it comes to the house, when it comes to your house, you hear things differently. We'll see what happens.
And also in like another, that not just is Paro getting out of touch with the people, he's out of touch with his own natural resources. He's out of touch with the land, the livestock, the everything that's going on. Mm-hmm. Do you think that was just inherently because of power and class?
Yeah, he built. I mean, like we were talking in a tour club today, how the way that the Pharaoh is isolated was on purpose, right? The kingdom of the king of Egypt like builds complete fortresses, I will say, we use that word, around himself, so he doesn't have to be with the people or surrounded by people, or even see that they have any affliction. Like, he doesn't care. Why would he care? He got everything he wants.
Then if he thinks that, commentaries explain that the Pharaoh thought of himself, pharaohs were thought of as divine. They were thought of as almost being like demigods or somewhere around there, superhuman but not quite divine. Maybe Paro thought that he could have gotten himself out of this situation.
Well, yeah, and of course he had his own, diviners and magicians who were there in order to create that kind of environment. So whatever he needed, if he couldn't do it himself, he had people who would do it for him, right? Like, they were there, like, their sticks, their staffs turned into serpents, and they were able to make, water blood, that kind of thing. So like, yeah, like he had people around him. He surrounded himself with people. I mean, you even think back towards the, several portions ago, like he had his own baker, he had his own butler. Like he surrounded himself with people who would take care of him, so that he didn't have to take care of himself. And that is a sign of like wanting to shield yourself from anything that would, I think, probably even create any notion of empathy, or that people have humanity. Everybody is there in service of Paro, but that's on purpose.
Right. And then ultimately, Paro has no one in service of him. Once the plagues continue, and then it's the plague of the firstborn, and Paro reaches his breaking point, there's no one who can help him.
Yeah, that's a humbling place to be. And it's a shame that, it takes all of that. But, we were talking today, like, what they're I think, kind of in our human experience, there's no way for us to get it. I think collectively, people individually might get it in a different way or faster. But if there isn't some like loud bang, or some, something that actually like creates our turning of our head to pay attention to whatever it is, we're not doing that. We're like we've got our shields up, we've built our own little palaces around ourselves and believe the world only goes around us. And so we're not paying attention. And, it reminds me of that poem, like they came for the communists and I didn't say nothing. And they came for so-and-so and I didn't say nothing. It's like, yeah, because we get in our own little palaces, and we don't even acknowledge that there are other people on this planet and that they too could be experiencing something that's happening, right? But when we do that, we actually separate ourselves from the other humans, and we miss the suffering that people have, but also we aren't even able to express joy when they're having joyous moments. Because if I'm having a hard moment, I'm in my palace, I don't want to hear about your joy. And if I'm, experiencing pain or suffering, right? That's actually our humanity says we reach out for a community. But when we shield ourselves off, that's hard to do.
Now, I mean, your average person, but your average Egyptian should be empathetic at this point. Like, since the times of Avram, people have been coming down from Canaan, people have been coming down to Egypt because they can't find food. There's no grain, they need money. There's all types of reasons. They were even doing human trafficking. There was all types of reasons that they would have seen the poor people of the region.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the Egyptian people's heart was hardened too?
I think it can be. Like when you're in a place of plenty, or you're doing okay for a while, sometimes you miss that point of like, this is for a while. Like this may not be forever, that I got what I need, so I don't care that everybody else don't have what they need. And we see that playing out here too, right? People got a little something, so they'll say, well, I have health care, so why do I care if everybody else got health care? Or, I got a job, I make more than minimum wage. Why would I care that anybody else gets to make more than minimum wage, right? And so we see that like this human experience allows for us to do that, for ourselves to just get to the point where we're not soft, that we aren't tender, and we aren't allowing ourselves to actually be stitched into the human experience with other people who are here. That we build our palaces and we go on about our business.
Talk about being stitched into the human experience. Like you said, like you alluded to before, all of this is happening courtesy of a God that they have never heard before up until very recently. All of this is happening because of a group of people that they may not have even had interactions with beyond certain regions of Egypt. All of this is happening to a group of people who seem to be caught unaware all of a sudden.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, we get these different places. We talked about how they were probably operating differently or manifesting differently for different people. Right. And so we also see that in the Psalms, like in Psalm 78 and Psalm 105, like you see a different list of plagues, that not like the recounting of these plagues are different. And what I want to say about that is that when people are experiencing things, that like we count them up differently because of our experience of them, right? Like I think in Psalms 105, there's 7 instead of 10, right? And so I think about how like when we've been looking at what's happening in our country, we've been looking at the police who were formerly slave catchers still going out catching black folks and killing them, right? We see how capitalism has destroyed our ability to like have rest and be able to like thrive. We see how healthcare, which is so important for all of our people, just gets denied folks. We see how folks who are trans, like myself, get treated out in public. It adds up differently for different people. So if I only experience, say, the lice, and I didn't, like the frogs didn't come in my house, or I didn't have like the big animals running around, during the swarm, right? Then I may not count that as a plague against our people. And when we are missing that, when we aren't like taking the culmination of what's going on, we're missing the fact that we are all suffering and that things have to change, that at some point we have got to allow ourselves to see all of this is affecting us, not just a few of us. It's affecting us. And even when I don't experience something personally, that all of this, all of these are plagues, all of them.
Right.
And we got to take stock of it, and we have to count them all. We got to count all of them, and we have to notice how they are actually hurting our people.
And that idea of the lack of empathy from people who have plenty and people who are coming this is sometimes from a place of privilege. Later in the plague of darkness, the Jews would borrow gold, would borrow silver, would borrow precious metals from these people. They still had money.
Mm-hmm.
These people weren't broke. This wasn't a poor society. Your average Egyptian probably was doing economically way better than your average, Hebrew immigrant was.
Mm-hmm.
Hebrew ex-slave immigrant was.
Right. Yeah. But that's actually how power stays in power, right? It gives folks like a little bit of something, like make you think that you got what you need and maybe a little more. Maybe give you what you need and they give you a little bit more, just a little bit more. So you think that you got it, you there. And then guess what? You get hit with all this stuff too, right? And I think that's like a lesson for us, like to understand that when we are looking at these structures, there's these power structures that are built to uphold itself, not to help the people, but to uphold itself in power, that know that that's how they operate. They're going to give you a little bit. They might slide you a couple more hundred than they slid everybody else. But you are still up under this power structure. And it's the power structure that needs to go. It's not, I think that some people misunderstand, like, the things that people are wanting to put forth, like abolition and, getting rid of the police and that kind of thing. It's like, you don't understand it, maybe because it's not personally impacting you, and maybe you live in a neighborhood where police don't come and break your windows and come in and kill you while you sleep, right? However, it's not like individual police officers. We're talking about a system that has been built to create its own power and to keep that power. And we saw just how when they went in, they stormed the Capitol on Wednesday. We saw just how when the police decide what they want to do, and they don't want to get caught up in it, or they are in it themselves, we see how they act. Right? They act totally different. And so we have to understand this is about power. This ain't about these little individual characters. This is about power, and we got to be careful not to get caught up in it, so that we're not squeezed in that doorway. Like that police officer was, which I was so afraid for this guy, right? Like this police officer was squeezed up in that door. They were actually almost squeezing the life force out of him. And you know who I thought about? I thought about George Floyd, of blessed memory. And I thought about how in a second, your life can go away when you are caught up in that power structure and think that not George Floyd. I mean, I was thinking about him because of the way he died, but I'm thinking about this police officer who I hope is still alive. I know that the other one who got beat with a fire hydrant died. So, bless his memory. Right. And I just think about like how people get caught up in that power structure, and then somehow that power structure reminds you, it ain't about you. It's about us keeping our power, and we will keep our power, with or without you.
Now, it's unfortunate, but now that you're bringing up the Capitol and the storming of the Capitol, there were not just a few Jews who were involved in this. You had people holding up Mashiach flags, which, if you think that this is going to bring Mashiach, there's probably some type of discrepancy in between what's being taught and what you learn. But where does a Jew get off being part of the storming of the Capitol? With people like
caught up. People get caught up. They have black folks out there, right? We are there. There are like just enough. There's just enough doorway to make this not about whiteness as a construct around people, to make it just open enough so that people who come in there don't always just look like everybody else we thought they did, right? I saw a video of one of the Orthodox Jewish folks who was out there, and it makes me very sad because, again, what whiteness does as a power construct is that it constricts and it expands. And we are in a moment of great constriction. And just around 2016, when they marched on Charlottesville, right? And what did they say with their tiki torches? Jews will not replace us. Jews will not replace us. Well, guess what? They wasn't talking about us. Like they were talking about this notion of whiteness that has expanded enough for lots of folks who came here and weren't considered white when they first got here to America. It expanded enough to allow them to come in. And now we're in a constriction. And I think people are going to have to realize that this is about the power holding on to itself and that they're going to squeeze you out too. Like you could come out there, you can play their games, but you know, colloquially they say you play stupid games, you get stupid prizes. And I think that people are going to come up on these plagues that are coming into their own houses very soon, if they haven't already come. And they are going to realize just how constricting, how constricted whiteness is, and how they are gung-ho on holding on to that power. They'll use you. They'll use you to get there.
Do you foresee a situation where it's as bad as it got at the end of the plagues in Egypt, where there was no house where there was no dead body? There was absolutely everyone is being affected by the system. Absolutely everyone is being affected by what's going on. Do you think we're going to get to that point?
We may have to. We may have to. I thought that at this point in time, after months of this, of COVID-19, where we're like upwards of 400,000 people have lost their lives. Like, I feel like that has been a plague that has touched so many people in their house, but clearly not enough. And that's a shame that we have to say, oh, well, it's got to wait until everybody has experienced a personal loss with COVID for people to have desired to be stitched into the human experience with other humans and say, I'm going to do what I need to do in order to protect all of us, right? So I feel like even as we have experienced this, that folks have not done, they haven't done the right thing. And it may take, I hate to say it, but it may take that experience being so intimate until folks actually get it.
God forbid.
I hope not.
Because that was you want to talk about Plan Z, like that was the last resort.
Yeah.
Do you think that Paro could have done tshuva?
After this portion, I mean, I wish he would have done tshuva before we got to the last go, but you know, that's not the story, right? Because even last portion, we learned that in Shemot, it tells us the last thing is going to be the firstborn are going to die. Like we're told the end of the story before the story starts, right? And so I don't know whether or not Paro could have done tshuva. I wish he would have done tshuva after the frogs, and that was the second plague. When he actually attempted, he did say, I'm willing to let you go if you tell your guide to get these frogs out of here. But then, you know, that hardness came in again, right? And I think it was, but that's hard. That's hard when you are the king of your castle, the queen of your castle, the head of your palace, and somebody come in and they're like, nah, I have power over you. That's gotta feel bad. As somebody who hasn't really experienced being the head of a palace, right. I don't have that. I don't know what that feels like, but I have to imagine that feels pretty bad and pretty hard to deal with. And so you're gonna push back every time. You're gonna be like, no, you get out of here. I run this John. You know, like you can't be here with me. But we see that, we see that pushback, and I think that's why. Because that's got to be a hard experience of thinking that you're in charge and you ain't really in charge, which I think is a human experience that we all have to get used to. We ain't in charge.
you know, ultimately, Klal Yisrael, you know, the Jewish nation wasn't asking for freedom at the beginning. This
Mm-hmm.
was really just kind of a work furlough program.
Mm-hmm.
Let us go out to the wilderness. We're going to pray to Hashem, and then we're going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, we're not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
It started, though, with just that idea of we got to go and serve Hashem.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the people even knew what freedom was?
That's a good question. I believe that I really believe that liberation is like our birthright. It's like what we're born with. Now we experience conditions that are counter to that, but I think that there was. I believe that you have to know something, like you have to know it before you can ever actually experience. Because it has to be like a thought, an emotion, a feeling, like to have a foundation inside of you, and that's why I believe that we, particularly Black folks, we know liberation because we came here with it, and we'll know it again. But this experience that we're having right now is one in such that it feels like we don't we don't know what it is to be free. And I think like what's oh gosh, now I'm blanking on her name. I wish I could be like the oh snap. It'll come to me. She's saying, I wish I knew what it was to be free. And her name is escaping me, but it'll come. We actually do know that. And I believe that our Hebrew ancestors knew that too. They knew freedom in down deep in my grandma used to say in the belly of her soul, she knew something, right? And that's deep. When your soul got a belly, right? We know what it is. We can live into that freedom, right? And I think that that's part of the story we'll get later, is that, you know, as Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the folks, like, these are the practices we're going to do, so that when our children ask, like, what is happening, we're doing it because we want to remember that we used to have this situation that didn't correspond with what we know to be liberation, right? And that's how we get all of our practices around Pesach, right? And I think that we knew that because there was the only way to practice liberation is to know it. So they knew it, and we know it.
I like how you say it because we came here with it.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, that blueprint for liberation, that blueprint for freedom was imprinted into us.
That's right. That's right.
And God willing, maybe we find it again very soon. Thank you for this wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
And until next week.
All right.